This conversation goes off the rail really fast. I want to use this as a case study for those of you guys that are sympathetic to Palestine, for those of you guys that are attempting to see the plight of the Palestinian people. This is absolutely how you should never go about this conversation.
Emily, what did you make of that exchange I just had with Loki?
I just dislike how you ask a clear-cut question and the question never seems to be addressed on any of your interviews, quite frankly. It seems like they use the airtime as an opportunity to deny the question and just spread their own narrative, and it's pointless. The debate is pointless. It's a one-sided conversation, and there's no actual conversation. It's, here's my question. Oh, but what about this pin?
Right.
Okay, so she is talking about a conversation he had with a Palestinian rapper who's done work in Gaza, and how Piers Morgan, this is the context of it, and Piers Morgan said that she is saying that the conversation was frustrating to watch because it was a lot of whataboutism.
I mean, Nadine, my problem with it was, I've interviewed some pro-Palestinian voices in the last 2 weeks who were emphatic immediately. Let me make it clear. What happened on October the 7th was a disgusting terrorist attack, an abomination. And then they go on to talk about the plight of the Palestinian people.
And that's the way that the conversation should be had. What happened October 7th is bad. It is evil. I condemn Hamas. I condemn what happened. Now, I'm concerned for the civilians in Gaza and how do we mitigate casualties, okay? Fair conversation. And we can go into the geopolitical nature of that region. Here's what you shouldn't. She's going to give us a masterclass on how you should never have this conversation.
And maybe the historical conflict and so on. And I have great respect for people that do that. I've got to say, I really struggle with anyone who just cannot have the humanity to start by saying what happened on October the 7th was appalling.
Buckle up, Piers. Buckle up.
An outrage. Do you feel it was?
I think Palestinians are tired of that being the starting point constantly, when right now there are 6,000 Palestinians who have been killed in Gaza, over 2,500 of them children. And
she does exactly what Piers Morgan said. Instead of condemning what happened, instead of addressing the horror of October 7th and what led to all of this carnage and some would say heavy-handed approach that Israel is responding with the bombs and telling people to move and she goes right into the exact thing that Piers Morgan said. Why can't we just condemn the attacks?
3 mosques leveled, hospitals leveled. So we're tired of that being the main goal of the conversation.
It's not the main goal.
Part of it.
It's the starting point of this war. Yeah, but hang on. It's the starting point of this war. It's not the main goal of what I want the conversation to be.
The starting point was when 750,000 Palestinians were ethnically cleansed, were expelled from their homelands during the Nakba, which my grandparents.
So she jumps back to 1940. This conversation really is about what timeline you want to start with. Which timeline you want to start with? We could talk about the Jews that were cast out from the land thousands of years ago after the conquest of Islam or the Roman Empire. We could talk about what happened in the 1920s with the pogroms towards Jewish people in the land. The starting point, she's very selective in her starting point.
Which my grandparents fled Palestine because of the Nakba, because of the massacres and the rapes that they heard. So to me, that's the starting point. That's my experience.
Let's go with that for a minute. Let's start with the Nakba, because the only Nakba is the part that people forget to address. 1948, after the partition plan, the Jewish state called in the Arabs to live prosperously and peacefully in the land. But what happened the very next day, not even 24 hours later, is the alleged Nakba.
Something people don't know is in the 1948 Declaration of Independence, Israel offered citizenship to all Arabs in the land. Israeli citizenship. And they all said, F you, and attacked Israel, allegedly telling the residents there to leave so that they can get Israel and cleanse Israel out of the land, cleanse the Jews out of the land. So she's pointing to that, which is true. The Declaration of Israel is still there. It's a document. We could all look it up. That's in there. So that's what she's pointing to. And she's just laying out that this Nakba wasn't this Israel being big bad, that it was something that happened to Israel by the Arab nations.
The Arab Leagues declared war on the Jewish state, that we just agreed to have our 2-state solution. And what did they tell their people? Leave the state. Let us get the land back. Let's ethnically cleanse the Jewish people. And once we defeat them in this war, you will come back to the land. So the only Nakba was a catastrophe that you guys, the Arab Leagues, waged a war that you could not win. And that is why, I'm sorry, your grandparents had to leave their homes.
That's completely ahistorical.
And listen, she said, I'm sorry your grandparents had to leave their home. Her response is, that's completely ahistorical. The Declaration of Independence of Israel is not ahistorical. This is historical fact.
I don't represent the Arab League. I'm Palestinian, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Palestinians.
But why do you find it hard to just start, given this war, this latest war that's erupted, began with a terror attack on October the 7th, why is it hard to not just say, that was terrible?
I don't see you asking Regev if he condemned the slaughter of innocent civilians.
You can't do it, can you?
No, she can't, because she's the same woman who said every Zionist before they die should hear pop, pop before they die. So she probably...
She got the quotes. She had the quotes tucked for this lady.
probably agrees with the massacre, so why would you condemn them?
I think the media is part of manufacturing consent.
We're talking about you.
I'm speaking here, and I'm not interested in speaking to genocide deniers. The
Genocide deniers. Yikes.
media is manufacturing consent for genocide against the Palestinian people, just like they did with the lie of the weapons of mass destruction.
So she's saying the media is against the Palestinian people. I don't know how you're watching BBC, MSNBC, all the people that repeated the false notion that Israel bombed a hospital, which was disproved, and then BBC had to eat their words and correct themselves and release the independent verification. I don't know how you can look at that. All the mainstream media outlets in the West saying what the daggone Hamas reporters told him to say, and then say the media is against the Palestinians.
Was used to justify the murder of over 1 million Iraqis. And there's been many lies that have been repeated all over the news, including on your show.
So she points out to the Iraq war, okay, which was a terrible, illegal war that should have not been fought. I'm not sure how this is directly connected to what happened October 7th.
CNN had to rescind, and even you said in subsequent interviews about the 40 beheaded babies. I haven't seen a single shred of evidence. I have not seen a single shred of evidence about these accusations coming out.
I was actually deliberately misquoted. You raised an interesting point there about this issue of the beheaded babies from the October 7th terrorist attack. I was accused by Bassem Youssef of saying on air that 40 babies had been beheaded. I never said that. I said there were reports that 40 babies had been killed and that some had been beheaded.
Which has been proven true, which Israel has released images of killed babies, and there has been verified that there has been some people of all ages, including babies, that were beheaded. The number of 40 was combined with 40 children and beheaded babies, and they just said 40 beheaded babies, and the media ran with it. I don't think Israel ever officially came out and said that. I think that was something that was ran by the media, and Piers Morgan is correcting and saying, I never said that.
That appears to have been borne out by other reporting, but I haven't seen the full details of every single casualty, so I don't know for sure. I certainly never said 40 babies were beheaded, but that clip has gone around the world, and I've been bombarded with abuse based on an absolute lie.
I don't see a big difference between saying 40 babies were beheaded versus maybe,
some. You don't think there's between 40 and some?
Because at the same, that's the lie that's being used to kill 6,000 Palestinians in Gaza right now.
Okay, well, let me ask him. Let me ask him.
It's like if there were some, as if it makes a difference if there were some beheaded versus 40. Like, it's the fact that there were any beheaded shows you the complete demonic nature of what happened October 7th.
Emily, with this question, I've asked Nadine, can she say she was horrified by what happened?
She wasn't.
And she will not say that, which I think is very disappointing. Would you, in return, when you look at what's been happening in Gaza in the last 2 weeks, do you find that appalling, that the loss of young lives, of babies, of children, of women, innocent people who had nothing to do with the terror attacks?
Yep.
Absolutely, 100%. Any death of innocent civilians should be condemned privately and publicly, and I cannot believe I have to say that. So yes, every children that is being collateral damage, every woman that's becoming collateral damage, my heart aches for them.
Why can't you do that?
I think we all agree that the loss of innocent life is sad, but I believe that the loss of innocent life wouldn't be an issue.
It's okay
if
when
Israel
it's the
didn't
Jews.
ethnically cleanse Palestine to begin with.
Whenever there's I believe the life of innocent, but again, the point of this video is to show my Palestinian friends, the handful of Muslims that watch this channel, this is not how you have this dialogue. And I'm going to get to why here in a second, okay? I'm going to get to why here in a second.
In 1948.
Well, they didn't, and
that is the source of this. To me, I go to the source of the issue.
But
what happened on October 7th isn't the beginning of what Palestinians
had you asked me,
have been
okay, but Nadine, ask me.
That's not the starting point.
Why don't you ask me what do I think of that? You have a lot of preconceived views of what you think I think. I agree with you. I think the displacement of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians in 1948 is the root cause of all of this.
Well, you can thank the Arab Leagues for declaring war on the two-state solution.
There are myriad people at fault in the next 70 years.
We were ethnically cleansed from our land. It's not like Jewish people were ethnically cleansed from the land of Palestine. They colonized it from other people.
But
I'm actually discussing with him. I refuse to speak to genocide denier.
I
refuse to speak to genocide
She's not a genocide denier. She's not.
Do you know the definition of genocide?
No, I do know the definition of a genocide. Gaza currently is a concentration camp because the Palestinians.
Do you think Hamas wages genocide?
I believe that. Look at the numbers. Look at the Palestinians.
Couldn't answer a simple question. Do you think Hamas wages genocide? And she said, look at the numbers.
Palestinians who have been killed.
Hamas's stated purpose is to eradicate the Jewish people. It's their stated purpose.
The first thing that we should be fighting for
literally
is for
genocide.
Palestinians to be returned home to their homeland.
That is literally
about the specifics
Hamas's stated purpose is literally the definition of genocide. It's wiping out people based on their ethnicity.
The hostages who were released had otherwise to say.
Oh, the 2 out of 250. Let's applaud Hamas. You can't. Okay.
The hostages that Israel didn't even want to take to begin with. They didn't even want to take them back.
But they did take them. The Palestinians need to divorce
as they bomb Gaza, risking their own hostages. They don't care about killing.
Palestine needs to be liberated from Hamas because when your governing body is a terrorist organization. That is the root of the problem, not the alleged ethnic cleansing.
The ethnic cleansing of Palestine happened decades before Hamas was even created.
Let me ask you a question. Do you think that Hamas should stay in power in Gaza?
I'm not here to talk about...
Oh, she can't answer the question.
Political organizations. No, I don't care about these questions because my people are being ethnically cleansed. Because I see the faces of 2,500 Palestinian children on social media every day, charred, mutilated, having chemical weapons against them. So this is going to be my priority on the show, just like any Palestinian around the world is speaking up for our cause.
You will also stop using babies as human shields. Stop
it's the most densely populated region in the world.
Yeah, but you will also know
2.3 million Palestinians. Half of them are homeless.
Let me respond to you.
This is a ridiculous argument.
My question is whether you think it is good for the Palestinian people that Hamas stay in charge, given the scale of the terror attacks they carried out, given the inevitable
It's a very straightforward question.
Responses come from Israel, with the inevitable loss of Palestinian lives, given the displacement now of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians out of the north of Gaza into the south, and who knows what's going to happen. The devastation to Gaza and to Gazan people has been unbelievable, and yet entirely predictable once Hamas decided to carry out the terror attack on the scale they did. I simply ask you, do you think that's a good thing for Palestine?
Is it not predictable that there will continue to be resistance to oppression as long as apartheid, occupation, ethnic cleansing, genocide continues to exist?
Buzzword. No context for how any of these things have came. The policies, the wars that have gotten to these separate parts of where the West Bank and Gaza, and why is Gaza under a blockade? When did Israel pull out of Gaza? No context, just buzzword.
Whether Hamas exists or not is an irrelevant question, because as long as oppression against the
it's an irrelevant question.
Palestinian people
how can you end that oppression as you see it? And many would agree with you.
Why don't we address the oppression first? She called Israel an apartheid state, so I'd like to just define what apartheid is. It is segregation, like what South Africa is facing, but the alleged apartheid is because Israel set up security measures after the numerous bus bombings in 2000 and set up checkpoints, which they got very insulted by. But it's the same way that airports now require security after 9/11, reasonably so. So it is taking security precautions. Secondly, we have 3 Arabs, and if I'm not mistaken, Muslims currently sitting in the Knesset. Does that sound like apartheid
Let
to
me
you?
quote the Israeli...
Sheesh. Okay, so the reason why I showed this again is this is not how you persuade people. This is how you repel people from your position, because these sorts of tactics are the same sorts of tactics that in America have been used with the leftists and the radical queer theory ideology. The same way she's talking. What about this? But what about this? But what about this? What about this? And what's happening is in real time, even though the institutions are still embedded with this oppressed model and this intersectionality, the institutions are still that. But the people on the ground, the average person, right? The person that's walking is becoming more hostile towards the struggles that LGBTQ people are facing. And so when you see things that are happening in real time and there's a shift happening, you're not going to persuade people with this sort of rhetoric. You're going to persuade people by being clear and direct in condemning terrorism, while at the same time saying, how do we come to a reasonable solution in Gaza? America and Israel is going to say Hamas has to get out. How Hamas has to get out? Israel is very antsy to go in on a ground invasion. It seems like America is trying to talk some sense into them and to try to get them to practice some restraint. I think the civilians need to be protected. I think we got to get those hostages out there. That really should be the priority. And how do we get those hostages out there? And so I think, like, if we can come to those terms, what's best for the Palestinian people is that the casualties would be mitigated of civilians, is that there would be wisdom on Israel's part, but ultimately that Hamas would be pulled out of there. Dropping a bunch of whataboutisms instead of ignoring what happened October 7th is the way you don't persuade people. It's the way you repel people. And the shift has already happened in the West. It is happening and will continue happening in the Western zeitgeist, where people will see this sort of stuff and they will want to pull further away from supporting these sorts of causes. And that's not what you want. That's not what you want. You want to win hearts and minds, and you win that by persuading people, by having dialogue, by conceding points. Yes, and versus what about. Yes, and versus what about. We see, according to the Bible, that prayer is extremely important in terms of us being transformed from the inside out when we get aligned with God's will. For the Christians watching this channel, I want you guys to implement these spiritual disciplines in your day-to-day life. And the only way I've been able to do this consistently is through writing down my prayers in a prayer journal that does a few things. One, it allows me to reflect and come to God humbly and ask him to move on my behalf. And 2, it allows me to document my prayers, which ultimately help me remember the very things that I was praying for and see the hand of God tangibly in my life when he answers them. So I would urge you, consider writing down your prayers. It could be in a blank notebook. It could even be on your phone. Or you could check out the one I personally designed and used from my own quiet time and spiritual discipline that I think will be a huge blessing. It's the exact structure and system that I've used for years to pray and be more consistent in my spiritual disciplines. You can pick yours up today by clicking the link in the pinned comment below. All right, I'll see you over there. Peace.